Hi, Lucian. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. We are here today. Our presenter is Maria Davis Pierre, and the topic is going to be autism and the Black family. She will present cultural perspectives from the lens of a parent and as a licensed mental health therapist. So welcome, Maria. We are so glad that you are here, and we're looking forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that. Let me get my PowerPoint started here. And can everybody see that?
I can see it, Maria.
Perfect. Okay. And during the presentation, I actually do not play my video because I have ADHD and it will distract me, but I will come back on when we start the question. So I know we're on a limited time and we do have a lot of information to cover. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. So I'm going to be talking about autism and the Black family today. I am Maria Davis Pierre. I am a licensed mental health counselor in Florida, and I'm also the CEO and founder of Autism in Black, Inc. I have two children who are autistic, my oldest who is 8, and my son who was diagnosed about a month ago who is 5. My oldest is the reason that Autism in Black exists because it was a lot to get her diagnosis. And even after we spent a while getting her diagnosis, even when colleagues would come in after getting her diagnosis, we still saw a huge gap when it came to cultural perspectives and lack of support for Black parents. So that is the reason that I created Autism in Black. And just my friendly disclaimer that I am a licensed therapist, but I'm not anybody's therapist on this webinar. So please do not say that your therapist told you this information. Also, even though I'm talking in general about Black people, understand that we are not monolithic. Also, I try to cultivate a safe space, and sometimes things that will be said will be uncomfortable, but that is okay because discomfort can lead to growth. So let's get into it. So what comes to mind when you think of culture? If you had to think of the first few things that popped in your mind when it came to culture, what would be some of those things? And feel free to use the chat box and put in there what you think of when you hear the word culture. Let's see. Identity, yes. Traditions, yep. A group of people who are similar in some ways, exposure and experiences, family values. Yes, all of those things are some of the first things that pop into our mind when it comes to culture. Let me see if I put in here. So for culture, it is the shared customary beliefs, attitudes, values, social forms, social norms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group. When thinking about culture, I like to use this iceberg concept of culture because I think it's a great explanation of how culture presents itself in society. So what we can view when it comes to culture is we see the music, the food, the cooking, the dress, the music, the arts, we can see all of those things. But really what drives culture is what is beneath the surface, right? Body language, patterns of handling emotions, facial expressions, approaches to problem solving, right? Social interaction rate, notions of adolescence, eye behavior. All of these things are what drives what we see. So why do I like to start off with culture? Why does it matter? Because culture sensitivity is necessary in identifying, assessing, and providing services to autistic children. And the core characteristics of autism affect social and communication skills, and to some extent, these skills are culturally determined. If we go back to that iceberg concept of culture, eye behavior, right? Body language, patterns of handling emotions, facial expression. These are things that are included in those assessments that actually provide the diagnosis. And if the evaluator is not aware of how culture presents itself in the room, then it leads to higher misdiagnosis rates, or, our children just not getting diagnosed at all. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be focusing on 4 factors that interfere with an autism diagnosis, with the services or the interventions. And they are race and ethnicity, family beliefs, values, and religion, economic status, and schools. So race and ethnicity. So just last year, the CDC made sure to announce in their new data that they come out with regarding, autism, that autism does not occur less or more in one race or ethnicity than another. And it's important to note this because prior to that, even though that, a lot of us knew this already and pretty common information, it really needed to be said because it does interfere with healthcare professionals, meaning that research has shown that healthcare professionals believe that Black children could not be autistic. They did not want to give them the diagnosis. The first thing that would come into their mind would be a behavioral diagnosis, oppositional defiant disorder, or ADHD, things like that. They would automatically think of in the school, the categorization of emotionally behavior disturbed, right? So those things would be the first things that a lot of practitioners would think of rather than autism. So cultural disparity regarding healthcare experiences in general is affecting the efficiency and quality of getting a diagnosis. Views and behaviors of healthcare professionals contribute to disparities in diagnosis. Like I was saying, healthcare professionals the research would show that a lot of them would not believe that Black children could be autistic. And some would even know or see characteristics of autism, but would not want to have the conversation with Black parents, Black mothers in general, because of fear of how that interaction would go. They wanted to stick to their 15 to 20 minute window of seeing a parent or, seeing the patient. And they felt that if they started this conversation about autism, they would go out of that window. So rather than start the conversation, they just ignored it altogether. And what does this lead to? It leads to the gap in diagnosis that we currently have. Right now, we have about a 1.5 year gap overall between when a white child is diagnosed and between when a Black child is diagnosed. And that's just an overall gap. When we look at certain districts, certain cities, states, we're talking about 8 years, 9 years. I had a colleague who was telling me, a few months back that a 12-year-old was getting her categorization in school. She didn't have her medical diagnosis, but she was just getting her categorization in school, and she was 12. So we know that with having a later diagnosis, this results in services being received at a later time. And we all know the importance of early intervention, and we can't make that time up. So it's so important to be aware of culture and how it displays differently as practitioners, and how just being Black alone leads to biases that come into the room when talking to healthcare professionals that can lead to this gap. So moving on to family beliefs, values, and religion. So parental recognition and concern about the characteristics of autism are not consistent within nor across ethnic groups. There's differences in parent knowledge, beliefs, and concerns about overall child development and developmental delay. When it comes to having your Black child and seeing these characteristics, the concern may not be as heightened as it would be for white parents. Research has shown that white parents are also more likely to have this discussion with their practitioners about developmental delays and actually get listened to, right? So Black parents will talk to their healthcare practitioners about these delays, and they may be told, you just need to wait, there's nothing wrong quite yet that we're seeing, give us until the next well visit. And Black parents are more than likely to take that information and not push it because of how we've been taught. We don't question those in leadership positions. So again, that leads to a gap in the diagnosis. Also, if my child is being watched by a family member that is older, grandma or my parents, then they're not particularly looking for developmental delays. They're trying to make sure the child is fed, that they're clean, that they're dry, that they're playing and happy. They're not necessarily looking for developmental delays. And even when we bring it up to some of our family members, we get met with resistance. There's been times where you may say, oh, I think so-and-so needs to go see the doctor. He's not talking yet. And you could be met with, well, you didn't talk till you were 5. So, just leave that baby alone. Give that baby time to catch up. When knowing that if I really wasn't talking until I was 5, then I probably needed to have some sort of intervention or see some sort of professional to help with that. So it's just difficult when dealing with not only the stigmas within your own community, but outside of your community as well. Black parents may hide their children from the community due to these stigmas associated with community members thinking the child is not disciplined properly. When it comes to Black parenting, society feels that Black parents have to hold their children in line more than any other race. Like Black children should not go out in public and act up, right? And not only is that how society feels, but that's how it is in our community as well. People do not give Black children the grace to be disabled. They don't think automatically, oh, this child is disabled, especially when dealing with diagnoses that are not visible. So the first thing they think is this child is not disciplined properly. They have some sort of behavior problem. And due to this, Black parents may feel like they need to hide their children from the community as a safety measure for their children. And then in talking about religion, while we know that, again, this is just speaking in general, but religion is a foundation for a lot of Black homes. So the first people that I'm going to talk to would be people in my church when dealing with something, because we're taught to, one, not tell professionals our business because we don't know what they're going to do with that information, but we take our issues to God. We pray about it and we take it to our pastor. And if you're going to your pastor to get help with your diagnosis that you're dealing with and trying to move through this process of acceptance, it can be met with resistance, because having a child with a disability can be seen as a punishment for sins. I've had clients who have went to church, went to their pastor and told them that, my child is autistic. And the pastor said, we're going to do a laying of a hand ceremony. We're going to pray this out of your child so that they can go live and be happy and free, right? Well, we know that your child is still going to be autistic after they lay hands on them and pray the autism out. We know that the child is still going to be autistic. So my client was actually met with the reason that your child is still autistic is because this is a punishment for your past sins. You were involved in so many sins prior to having children. Now this is your burden to bear. And for a family whose foundation starts with religion, you're already dealing with guilt alone as a parent. And then for somebody who you hold in a high position to tell you this, it can be foundation shattering that you're dealing with. On the flip side, having a child who has a disability can be seen as a gift from God, like, this is my testimony. I'm supposed to walk this walk, So a lot of times as practitioners, we're coming in, or as teachers and staff, we're coming in and we're saying, oh, this Black parent is resistant. They don't care. They don't want to be involved. When what they're really dealing with is a struggle of what's going inside of them. Like, hey, if I accept this person coming into my home, accept this person giving my child these therapies, is God going to see that I don't trust him? Is God going to say, oh, now you're not deserving of any kind of cure, right? Even though we know there's not a cure, because you are having interactions with individuals that are supposed to be providing these services. So what it could be is an actual tug of war going on between that parent. So we have to be mindful that just because what we're viewing can look like resistance, that may not be what's going on at all. It may be actually that the parent is having an internal fight. Also, family members, church members, and friends serve as the majority support circle. And if that is what I am taught, I'm more than likely to believe those individuals. So as a healthcare practitioner, I can be coming in with, the right information, but because of who I am and because of what my title is, I may not be listened to, because family members, church members, and friends who are a part of the support circle, who have proved that they are trustworthy, are providing their own information, and that would be the information that I am more likely to listen to. So we have to use special techniques, which I'll talk about later, to be able to kind of break those defenses. So I want to talk about the Black side of parenting, because it is completely different when you're raising Black children in today's society. So I posted this little picture on my Instagram last year, and it's about myths about Black parents and autism. Really what I'm talking about is microaggressions against Black parents. And these are things that we're constantly met with, that we don't care, right? We don't care about our children. We don't care what's going on with them. We're resistant, you're just wanting to cause problems. You're asking all these questions and making it more difficult. That we're angry and loud. Anytime that we're advocating or things get heightened, we are angry and loud. And sometimes we do have the right to just be angry and loud, because our children are suffering. They're not getting the services that they're supposed to be getting. And we can clearly see the biases presented against us, but not other people. We lack intelligence, right? This is another reason that healthcare professionals didn't want to have conversations with Black parents, because they felt that they were not going to understand what was going on. We push for a diagnosis for a check. Oh, you're just doing this for money. You just want the money, the added money, so you don't have to work. Knowing that we're really pushing for a diagnosis, one, to get answers, and two, a lot of the services that our children are able to get need an actual diagnosis. But for us and for Black families, we're pushing for a diagnosis for a check. And then there's we are not actively involved, and this one affects Black fathers a lot. Like, oh, the father's not there, or how many fathers are, how many fathers does the mother have for their children? All of these things that are placed against us that we first have to deal with before we can even get to any kind of advocating. We have to deal with all of these microaggressions. And these microaggressions are not only against us, but our children as well. So multi-generational Black parenting. This is what we have to think about. There's oftentimes, depending on where you're at, more than one generation living in the home, right? So it could be me, it could be my mother, it could be my grandmother, all living in the home, all from different generations, all having opinions about how I should raise my child. And we know that when it comes to our elders in the Black community, we're supposed to listen to them. So if my elders are telling me, you're supposed to do A, B, and C, and then I have a healthcare professional telling me to do D, E, and F, I'm more than likely, again, to listen to A, B, and C, even though A, B, and C is completely wrong. Information has been passed down from generation to generation and has a historical context. There's a lot of mistrust when it comes to the Black community and healthcare practices because we have been experimented on, because our problems are not taken seriously. In med school now, they're still teaching that Black people have a higher pain tolerance than any other race, right? So that leads to us not getting pain meds in a faster way than any other race because they believe we have this higher tolerance. So we are up against this. And for those older generations, it was even worse for them. So a lot of their opinions are not going to be to go to any healthcare professional first. No, try this, try this, try this, and try this. And meanwhile, we're trying all of these A, Bs, and Cs, and that gap is getting bigger for our children. But because of how it works in multi-generational homes, that A, B, and C voice is a lot louder than that D, E, and F voice. So it's not that they don't want to listen to us. It's not that they don't trust us, even though that could be some of it. It's just that I'm listening to those that already have proved that they're trustworthy, that they're in my support circle. And then there's worries of the Black parent, right? There's a lot of worries on how we have to raise our children. We have the worry of how our children are perceived because they're more likely to be perceived in a negative way. If my child is in public and they're having a sensory meltdown, and then there's a white child in public having a sensory meltdown, that white child is more likely to be met with grace rather than the Black child. And we know this, so we have that worry of how our children are going to be perceived. There's the dilemma between letting them be children and the harsh reality of what being Black means. Do I let them have, all of this childlike, no worries and, just letting them live, or do I have to let them know that, hey, you are going to be met with a lot of, resistance just because of the color of your skin? And how early do we have this talk? And when I have this talk, does that take the childlike glimmer out of your eyes, right? Does that snuff out your light? And a lot of times it does, but we have to have these conversations, and we have to have them a lot earlier because of how society treats us. We know that children, Black children who are 5 and 6 are being restrained in schools, are being arrested at schools, right? We know this, so we do have to have these conversations early. We know that in preschool and kindergarten, they're having conversations around community helpers, and then we have to go back and have conversations with our children on why community helpers are not always helpers to us because of the color of our skin. So this is the dilemma that we're met with, and it's a fine line that we kind of have to teeter on. And then how Black parents feel they must parent their children. There are a lot of Black parents who feel that if they handle it, if they handle any kind of behavior issue, or if they handle any kind of issue, it's going to protect their children and save their children, because they only see 2 options for their children, right? Dead or in jail. That's what it is. And if I'm going to intervene before they are met with any of those interactions outside of my home, then it'll be better for the child. So we have to think about those things as well. And then before I talk about economic status, I also want to talk about, in working with the Black parent, what it's important to do. So it's important to come from a place of education rather than telling a Black parent what to do. Instead of, I'm telling you this because I'm the professional and I went to school and I know what I'm talking about and you just better do what I say, it should be more of coming from a place of, here's why this would be helpful. Also knowing that, you may have your multi-generational family going on, you have your support circle going on. It's easier for me to say, Yes, A, B, and C can work, but also you can do D, E, and F. It's not an either or thing, it's a both and. So coming from that approach is more likely to get you to let them let their defenses down rather than meet you with that defense of I'm not going to listen to you. Because a lot of times what you're going to be met with is a little game that Black parents like to play, and it's called What You Won't Do, right? What you won't do is come in here and tell me how to raise my child. You're not going to come in here and tell me I don't love my child. You're not going to question me about the way that I parent my child or those around me parent my child, right? And there's so many more. So if you were to meet them with a place of educating them and giving them that both and rather than that either or, you would have better outcomes. So economic status. We know that research shows that Black families have a higher chance of being born into poverty and staying there. And that impacts a lot of stuff because things cost money, right? So we know that that may also lead to being uninsured or underinsured. And if I am taking my child to their PCP, their primary care physician, and they see somebody at 12 months and that PCP provider is like, oh, I'm seeing some things, but let's wait until your child's 18-month well visit and see if they're going to catch up. And then at 18 months, you have a completely different PCP that did not read the notes, that doesn't know that their child had that developmental delay at 12 months. And then at 18 months, they're seeing and they're saying, oh, let's wait to their 2-year well visit. Again, leading to the gap, right? Also, I may not have insurance coverage to take my child to see all of the specialists that they need to go to. And again, that's going to lead to the gap. There may be issues with job flexibility, right? If my job is not going to give me the time off to attend a 4-hour IEP meeting, if they're not going to give me the time off to attend their weekly therapy appointments, multiple therapy appointments, then I have to make a choice, right? And that choice is developmental concerns versus economic needs, right? It's important for me to be able to have a place to live, to have food to eat, to have lights and water and all of those things, rather than attend a 4-hour IEP meeting or take my child to these therapies. If I have to make that choice, it's going to make sure that they have a roof over their head and food to eat. So we have to think about those things as well. So schools, this is my favorite one to talk about because I think it's so important because our children spend a lot of time in the school, especially, when they are under 18. So I have a little image that you all may have seen online. And it says, when do I become a threat? And it's an image of 3 Black males at different ages. And the truth is, this little guy in the middle is when that light switches from, oh, they're so cute and precious, to, oh, this person is a threat. Studies have shown that for teachers, this happens at 2. So at 2 years old, my little Black boy is going from cute little precious person to, oh, he's a threat and I don't know what he's capable of. 2 years old, right? So this is what Black parents have to think about. Sorry about that. So there's also the adultification of Black children in schools. And some of you may have heard this term before, but adultification is the denial of innocence that defines childhood. Adultification depicts Black children as malicious, intentional, calculated, and deserving of harsh consequences. It denies Black children the protection all children deserve. The APA did a study on teachers that were going through school, about to get their certification. And they did a study where they had children of different ages, different races come in. They did not speak. They just would give the child an emotion, and the child would have to show that emotion on their face. And when it came to Black children, Black boys in particular, the teachers saw them as angry. No matter what emotion that they were displaying, it was anger, anger, anger. And they did this study on adults as well, and it was the same results. The Black adult males were seen as angry, angry, angry. So if my teacher is, one, adultifying me and seeing everything that I do as malicious, intentional, and calculated, and just by looking at me, they always think that I am angry, that is going to lead to a trajectory of the school to prison pipeline, right? And we know that that is something that Black children are constantly faced with. But before I talk about the school to prison pipeline, I want to talk about the adultification of Black girls in schools, because a lot of the focus is on males, but even our Black girls are being adultified, right? Our Black boys are being adultified in a way that they are not, where they're seen as more aggressive and violent, but for our Black girls, they are hypersexualized. A lot of times, you know, the Georgetown study, I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but there's a Georgetown study, and I can get you the link to that, where they did a study on adultification of Black girls in the school. And the results led to Black girls needing less nurturing, less protection, less support, less comfort. And then they were seen as more independent, more knowledgeable about sex, more knowledgeable of adult topics. So they're saying that Black girls don't get that same grace, that they're automatically seen as hypersexualized individuals. And when it comes to, you know, sexual assault and rape and things like that, they're being blamed for it because of being hypersexualized. So this is how adultification affects Black girls and Black boys. And it again leads to the school to prison pipeline in the schools. That trajectory is often for our children, leading them right to prison. And then in prison, that's when they get their diagnosis a lot of times. And knowing that if they would have got in school and they got the right interventions and the right services, probably wouldn't be at that point that they are at now. So there was a cradle to prison pipeline report that I want to talk about some of the studies, some of the results of the study. So it came out that a Black boy in 2001 had a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison in his lifetime. The same study reported that a Latino boy had a 1 in 6 chance, and a white boy had a 1 in 17 chance, right? A Black girl born in 2001 had a 1 in 17 chance of going to prison in her lifetime. A Latino girl, 1 in 45. For a white girl, a 1 in 111 chance. So you can see how it's stacked up against Black children, right? Even when it starts at 2, when this little Black boy right here is going from seen as cute and precious to malicious, right? Also, when thinking about school suspensions, Black girls make up 20% of the school population, but they make up 54% of suspensions. Black boys make up 19% of the population, but they make up 45% of suspensions, right? And there's such a disproportionality in criminal justice when it comes to Black children. 67% of children in the juvenile justice system are children of color. 41% are Black and 21% are Hispanic. Children of color are disproportionately transferred to the adult criminal justice system, where they are tried and prosecuted as adults. And this is important in knowing because at least 1 in 3 youth in the juvenile justice system has a disability qualifying them for special education services under IDEA. And those services are more than likely determined after they get into the system. So they went through school and been deemed a behavior issue, not seeing that it's a disability that they're not getting the correct interventions for. So that trajectory changed for them, and now they're getting identified in the juvenile justice system. Had they been identified earlier, we could have greatly changed that trajectory for that child. So in navigating the school system, both Black parents and Black children are up against the biases of school staff, retaliation. There's a lot of retaliation from school to Black parents, and the levels have even up now during COVID, because the first thing that schools like to do to get Black parents to stop advocating for their children is they like to call the police or call CPS. And both of those things are very scary situations for Black parents. We know that CPS has higher rates of taking Black children out of the homes than any other race. And we know what is met with having interactions with the police, right? So those are very scary situations for Black parents. And the school staff knows this, and they will call either CPS or police officers and get them involved and to get Black parents to stop advocating for their children. They're also up against the language that is used when it comes to reports and things of that nature, report cards, IEPs, just looking at the language that is used to describe Black children. Just those words of aggression and violent. And when you ask the teachers to explain exactly what they mean by that, a lot of times what they're describing are developmentally appropriate behaviors for the children, but because of their own biases, they see it as negative things. That's why it's so important to ask for explanations of the behavior. Aggression can mean so many different things. Explain how the child was aggressive. Write it out so that we can read it and go over it, right? Schools are also known to gaslight Black children and parents. And one thing that is hardly ever taken into consideration is the trauma and how that can make a child react. A lot of times children are in fight or flight mode, especially when it comes to SRO officers. And if you're escalating a situation instead of de-escalating a situation, and you call in the SRO officer and that child sees that officer and is immediately triggered and they go into fight mode, because there's a lot of times that children go into fight mode and they don't even realize the actions that are happening, the behaviors that they're doing, because they're in fight mode, because they're scared of what may happen. But they get punished for that. Because the situation was escalated instead of de-escalated. So what can we do with all of this information? How can we do better? One, we can become culturally responsive, right? You want to have an awareness of one's own cultural identity and views about difference and the ability to learn and build on the varying cultural and community norms of others. You want to be able to have a set of values that recognize diversity. You want to be able to demonstrate behaviors, attitudes, policies, and structures that enable you to work effectively cross-culturally, and also that to value diversity. You want to be able to conduct self-assessments to ensure sensitivity to cultural characteristics. It's so hard for us to check our own biases, regardless of race. It's so hard for us to be honest and truthful with our own selves. We have to be able to check our own biases before we have interactions with other people, because they will cloud that interaction and cloud your judgment. You want to be committed to manage the dynamics of difference. You want to be able to learn about and incorporate cultural knowledge into your daily practices. And you want to be able to adapt to diversity in the cultural context of the communities that you serve or that you live in. You also want to be able to move from inequality to justice. So I like this little graphic because it shows exactly what I mean by that, right? We want to move to justice because in justice, we are actually dismantling the systems that oppress people. In everything else, we're just giving, the access, but the system that oppresses individuals are still there. We want to completely remove those systems. We want to be able to go in and advocate for everybody and know that there's a difference when we're advocating for Black children versus white children, because there's so many other things coming in. We want to be able to call schools out on this. We want to be able to call community helpers out on this, our neighbors out on this. We want to be able to do this to dismantle these systems and to do it effectively. So some things that you should, think about daily is, what do you need to do to explore your own culture and biases before each interaction? What skills do you already possess that will be helpful in increasing your own cultural awareness? What cultural responsive questions do you need to ask to ensure that you get a high quality interaction and accurate information about a situation? And what can you do starting today that can be a culturally responsive practice? So that is the end for me. Let me stop my share and I will come back on camera and answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much, Maria, for your presentation. We had a couple of comments. First participant said, yes, I was told that it is a generational curse. Mm-hmm. when you were discussing that. And then we do have a question that says, so should we be educating churches and religious places about ASD?
Most definitely. We should. We definitely should be doing it in the Black communities, because the information doesn't get to our communities like it does to everybody else. Like I was saying, a lot of times we are dependent on generational information that has been passed down, and it is wrong information. So we should be educating wherever the community is. That's where we should be there, educating them about autism. So most definitely.
Do we have any other questions? Please feel free to put it in the chat feature and Maria can answer it.
Yes, Marcy, it's very sad, but it is the realities of, what we navigate on a daily basis. And I think for a lot of Black individuals, it's so normalized that this is just how we live our lives. This is what we do day to day. And a lot of people who are not in our shoes do not realize, what it is, because we do it with such ease. And the only reason we do it with such ease is because that's all we know. We have a couple of very positive comments. So thank you for your boldness in discussing this important information. It is much needed. It's a much needed discussion. The work continues. Had so valuable. Thanks for sharing the perspective. I don't often hear. Yes.
We have another question that says, do you have any recommended readings on this topic?
Yes, I would definitely read Push Out by Dr. Monique Morris, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, My Grandmother's Hands. These are all great books that can help you with continued work on being culturally responsive. Thank you so much. We have more questions coming in, which is great. Can you share some supports for Black parents? Sure, of course, there's Autism in Black, which is great. And yes, that is my biased opinion. But there's also the Maurice Rush Foundation. They actually have an online group that they do every Wednesday evening, and it's for anybody located anywhere. You go sign up on their website, and they will give you the link for the support group. So those are two of the top ones that I recommend. And somebody said they have a question specific to social groups and cohort-oriented therapies and/or programming. Do you have any recommendations on how we should consider and address race when creating cohorts? Can you explain more what you mean by that, Elise? Meaning, do you think everybody of one race should be together? Is that your question? Yes, I don't have a problem with you taking yourself off mute. Or do we have to unmute?
Lucian, is Elise able to unmute? If
Hi,
not,
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, Maria. Thanks. I mean, this is, everyone should hear this. I'm sure you're aware that it's a self-selected group, but everyone should hear this. So part of our clinic runs cohort-based programming. And over the evolutions of education, we have learned that when we're placing certain cohorts, so for example, if there's a gender non-binary participant in the group, we reach out to that family and we say, we just want to give you a heads up. You might, your child identifies this way, no one else in the group identifies. We want to give you the choice to enroll or not. We might also do that if we have a single female member. So clearly we are incredibly undereducated and under-evolved in how to best share that information with families. And it has been my personal experience that a family walks in on day one, they're the only Black child in the group, and it wasn't on any facilitator's radar to have that conversation with the family. So this is not an easy question to answer. Maybe you could just direct me to some resources or any initial thoughts just so we could start to have the conversation with our facilitators about how to be more aware of, if we're doing this in other domains and being aware of, that, how do we start to increase our awareness here?
I think it's going to be with the training of the facilitator and the facilities. So even if they are the only Black person there, you still have to be trained in how to navigate conversations and navigate that space in a safe way, and also have conversations with that family if they come to you about their child being the only Black one. I necessarily wouldn't have a call saying, hey, or I don't even know if I would like a call that says, hey, your child's going to be the only Black person there. Now, if I get there and see, and then make the decision from there as a parent to have a conversation with you all, or to just not enroll my child any further, then that's how I would personally. Some Black parents may want that heads up, but I think it would be more on the facility to make sure that they are ensuring a safe space and be ready for the questions that may come from their child being the only Black person there. Because, questions that I often ask providers, because I'm so used to being one of one in situations, is that, are we the first Black family that you've, having a group like this? Or have you dealt with other Black families? Do you have any culturally responsive training? And how do you see our Blackness influencing this group? Those are just some of the questions off the top of my head that I would ask that provider. But I think for Black people, we are often used to being one of one in a lot of situations. And a lot of times we've done the research and kind of know what we're going to be met with. And then it's going to be up to us to have that conversation, because you may be met with some offense if you're going to call somebody and say, hey, you're going to be the only Black person there. So that would be it's a tricky thing when dealing with race. So I would be more looking into making sure my facility is culturally responsive rather than putting that responsibility on the parent.
Maria, we have another question. Are there trainings within the criminal justice system that educate police officers with interacting with adults and children with ASD?
So my organization trains police officers in the criminal justice system on the intersection of race and disability. And I'm sure there's other organizations that do this as well. But the issue is that a lot of times these facilities don't want to pay for the training. They don't want to do it. So that would be the issue, because there's many organizations that do the training. It's just not facilities not wanting to pay for the training.
Thank you for your answer. Here's another one. How do we communicate to teachers and doctors there is such a difference in rearing a Black male in controlling behavior like restraint and locking a child in rooms until they calm down?
I'm a straight shooter, so I just have these conversations openly with healthcare providers, with teachers, with staff, in regards to, one, the traumatic effects in general on restraining and seclusion of children. You guys are all in Virginia. You might know Cheryl Poe. She does great work on restraints and seclusion. I would reach out to her to have, trainings done for the facilities in understanding the trauma that actually comes regardless of race, the trauma that comes from restraints and seclusions, but them knowing that Black children have a 200% chance of being more likely restrained than any other race, 200% chance. So just knowing that it's going to impact Black children more, children with disabilities more, having these honest conversations and setting boundaries, with the school system and, with doctors. So it's all about training. And a lot of times, again, people don't like to pay for information.
We have a lot of feedback of great answers. Thank you for sharing. Someone asked, can you include some resource slides with your PowerPoint to access with the recording?
Sure, I will. I'm just typing Cheryl Poe's name. Advocating for kids.
And if you add that to your PowerPoint slides on the archives when they're available, anyone can access them.
And who do I turn the slides into? Stacy?
Yes, Stacy would be a great person to turn them into.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it is 12:52. We'll wait about 1 more minute or so to answer any unanswered questions. Please attend and register for next Lunch and Learn. The topic is supporting sensory needs in the classroom and at home. I can send you the link in the chat feature. It's also on the VCU ACE website. So we have one more feedback. I respectfully agree with your information. I am a mother of a biracial son who was diagnosed with schizophrenia. It was very difficult to receive stable mental health treatment because he was able to be viewed knowledgeable about their medication and question the physician for medication. Unfortunately, my son gave up last year, July 2020, and passed away.
Sorry to hear that. It is so, it's difficult because a lot of professionals do not understand that culture comes into the room. They do not understand that we present differently as the Black individuals, especially when it comes to mental health diagnosis. We don't present the way the DSM says. And that's because the DSM was created by old white men on white men. So if I'm not a white male, then a lot of times my symptoms, my characteristics do not look like they do in the DSM. And then people just have a lack of empathy when it comes to Black people. And your son was biracial, and people more than likely just saw black boy. Because as we know, Barack Obama is biracial, and people just saw a Black president, right? So they're going to be met with that, and they have to, healthcare professionals just really have to understand there's such a difference when treating Black people.
We have a comment. This was so powerful. I so want to understand more to be a better educator.
Good, good. I love when that happens because it's necessary. Because we just have to do different, and luckily COVID, sat us down, even though the whole part about what COVID did is not lucky, but having us all sit down to actually understand that we need to start having these conversations, because for Black people, this has been a norm for us. A lot of people just started to realize when, the George Floyd situation happened that, oh my God, this is happening. For us, it had been happening. So now that we were all sitting down and people to understand that these are conversations that need to be had, honestly and truthfully. Like I say, if you're going to attend any kind of presentation on race, on intersection of race and disability, on cultural responsiveness, and you're not uncomfortable, then that person isn't talking about the necessary things, because within that discomfort is growth. And we have to be willing to have these open, hard dialogues.
Well, thank you everyone for your openness, your questions, for the presentation. It was a wonderful lunch and learn. We appreciate everyone being here, and a special thanks to Maria Davis-Pierre for her wonderful presentation.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody.